Okay, you're good to go.
Thank you. Right, good evening all, welcome and thank you for coming. Finance and Scrutiny Committee meeting. If we can start please with, have we received any apologies for absence? Which is only one person who I think is trying to get in.
No, we haven't received any.
Okay, okay. I've got Councillor Dyer just coming in, and could somebody resend the invitation to Mr. Mayor, please? Who is trying to get in? Do we have any declarations of interest for any of the items on the agenda? Councillor Voss.
Yes, I would declare an interest in 8.1 as a previous committee member and chair of Stratford in Bloom and a person who put together their grant applications.
Thank you. And no others. Have we
Yes,
received...
me please, Chair.
Oh, sorry, sorry, yep, right, I'll keep an eye out for your little blue hand. Right, go on.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, could I declare a non-pecuniary interest, which means I can still take part in the debate and vote, as I've sat on the Christmas Lights Committee for many years now as council representative.
Right. Thank you. No others. Okay, so can we please go to, have we received any written requests for dispensation for disclosable pecuniary interests? Nope, lovely. No need to grant any requests. Do we have any members of the public wishing to, oh, sorry. To receive communication from members of the public? Nope, lovely jubbly. Okay, moving on to the minutes of the draft open minutes for the Finance and Scrutiny Committee held on the 20th of July 2020. Do we have any issues arising, or are we happy to proceed with accepting the minutes? Councillor Howe.
Sorry, I was indicating I was.
You're indicating, right? Okay, quick off the mark. Okay, if we are then happy to accept, can we please indicate thusly? Okay, more to come. Okay, Councillor Fradgley, I haven't got a tick or a cross from you.
I'm not a member of the committee, Chair. Gina,
true. Excellent point. A big part.
On behalf of Stratford in Bloom.
Yes, sorry. Right. Okay. Lovely. In that case, we have all the votes in for that. Thank you very much. Right, to adopt the draft notes of the subgroup meetings reporting to Finance and Scrutiny, we have two sets of the Town Hall Income Facilities Wellbeing Panel meetings for the 11th and the 29th of June. If I can first look at the 11th of June, are there any matters arising, any questions arising from that? No? Okay, can I then please have your vote to accept those minutes? Lovely, thank you. Okay, and then moving to the notes of the Town Hall Income Facilities and Wellbeing Panel for the 29th of July. Do we have any matters arising? Is that Mr. Mayor's hand?
It was. Are we using virtual? I'll put my virtual hand up as well. Sorry, just to give you an update on the timing of the internal refurbishment, because of bookings that we have for the town hall later in the year, it was decided that this was best done at a quiet time, so we didn't lose any bookings, and it fits in much more conveniently with the staff needs. So it will now be go ahead sometime in January, February, but it's still going ahead, but just being deferred till after Christmas.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Right. Okay. Can I please have your votes for accepting the notes of that meeting? Lovely. Thanks very much. Okay, so moving on to the town clerk's open report.
Okay, the first item on the agenda here is to discuss and determine grant awards for next year, over 20,000. So the first one, the first one is Christmas lights. Now applying for a grant of 30,000.
Mr. Mayor, and then Councillor Howe.
Yeah, just to give you an update from Christmas lights, because I went to the AGM, which was last week or the week before. They are slightly short of cash at the moment because of their grant application to the town trust couldn't be met because of the separate issues that the town trust have with money at the moment. So Stratford Christmas lights this year are going ahead with a partial Christmas lights, which will actually mean it will be full Christmas lights, but only in certain streets. So I think it's going to be Bridge Street, Wood Street, High Street, Sheep Street, I think. So it's limited, but they are, I think the fact that and they've also got a new chairman now because Matthew Coombs has taken over. And I think they have become very aware that previously they might have thought that the grant applications from Town Council and Town Trust they'd always receive some money. But I think the COVID and the Town Trust one has given them a bit of a sort of a harsh lesson that they can't take anything for granted. I didn't say anything, but I'd like to think that this town council would carry on anyway, giving the money. I think it's one of those things that we should and need to support. But I think they're very aware that they do need to look at alternative fundraising methods. So that's one of the things they need to take on board going forward. But, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Howe.
Yeah, just a couple of things for me. Can I just ask the Deputy Town Clerk what the timing of this is? I know we have a set schedule, and possibly not deferring it, but it sort of does come into quite sort of close to the committee restructure where this would be under community services.
Okay, we're actually considering a grant application for the next financial year. So the one that is due to be paid out later this year for this year's lights was approved a year ago. So the reason we're considering it at this point is so that it gets included in the budget process ready for next year. So as things stand, the grant for this year, which was also for £30,000, is going ahead. Mm-hmm. So the application that they're talking about now, as you say, it's previously always been considered by the Finance Committee because it's part of the budget process. But if the new committee structure gets approved at the end of this month, then it could be taken up by that group. But at the moment, that would assume that the decision will be made. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, that is a good point. Okay, I think I think the Christmas lights is an important part of Stratford and our heritage, and sort of the attracting people to the town during the Christmas period. I would like to. I think Mr. Mayor has kind of highlighted on this issue. I think it would be good to move these discussions more from, and maybe it's probably potentially something for community services. I'd like to move them from they're assumed that we agreed to them because it's what we've always done, into we're actually making a conscious decision of no, this is something that we want to support as a town council. And when we come to setting the precept, for example, we've made this conscious decision to support this and what that might mean to the budget overall budget setting.
Mm.
I think potentially that there might almost, I know we are looking at the budget process, but the precise figures come a bit later from my experience last year, and so there was almost making this decision in isolation, where in fact it has knock-on effects further down in the budget setting process. Is my only comment.
Thank you. Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, Councillor Howe, I completely get what you're saying. It's been a very difficult 12 months for the Christmas lights, because we had so many ideas of fundraising, ways to bring in additional money, with the new members on the committee, of which there are several who are so enthusiastic and with some excellent ideas. Of course, with COVID hitting, it just sort of knocked us for six, really, which is a shame, because of what we had going in place were actually some great fundraising ideas. The Christmas lights are very, very important to people of Stratford, and also we've got quite a big kudos about it across the whole country as well. I do want to see this town council continue to support the lights. Our support has dwindled as shops have closed, as more major chains take over places in Stratford-upon-Avon. The support by businesses has gone down as well. It'd be nice to think that all businesses benefit from the Christmas lights, so they'd want to support them, but though the managers in the shop support them, head office very rarely do. As such, it does come down to the council to support the Christmas lights. I would hope that support would continue, not just this year, but for years to come as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alcock. Councillor Folchak, please.
Thank you. Yeah, it's. I think the Christmas lights do need to be supported. Sort of information from Mr. Mayor is quite interesting, that there may have to be a slight downgrade or on the lights. That I find that quite concerning, particularly as this particular year that we've had COVID-19, we need to do as much as we can to support the town centre businesses. And the Christmas lights are one way of attracting people from other places into Stratford to shop and spend their money. So I'm a little bit disappointed they didn't ask for more money, because I think in this particular circumstance, either I'd like to see the town council give more to plug some of the shortages, but also to contact the district council, perhaps to make a contribution so that the lights are as good this year as they have been in previous years. And there's still time to achieve that goal, I'm sure. So yeah, certainly it gets my vote. And I think in this particular year, they probably need more money. So I'd be open to all ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Curtis, who I've lost. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think certainly the town lights is worthy of support in principle, but I must admit, looking through the grant application, I would expect to see a much more rigorous application process. I would expect to see far more. I mean, having spent an awful lot of my life applying for funding from the Town Trust, from Arts Council of England, from all sorts of organisations. So just looking at a couple of things here. I mean, number 6, funding required. Please provide an itemised breakdown of how the money will be spent on a separate sheet if necessary. Total amount applied for £30,000. There should be a detailed breakdown, I think, there. So I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't make a grant, but I think we should expect rather more detail. Partner organisations or other groups involved, no partner organisations that to me demonstrates an organisation that is very, very reliant on single funding sources and isn't actually terribly resilient, as is proving the case. Evidence of benefit to the community. That's not really evidence of benefit to the community, I don't think. I mean, I think here again, there should be evidence from some of the retailers in the town. Is there an additional footfall? Does it demonstrate actual added cash value to the community? So I would just expect to see a much more rigorous application here that would enable us to say, yes, there is a clear cash benefit to the town centre, therefore we should be funding it by. But I think the town lights going forward needs to really try and diversify its funding streams and increase its partnerships to be able to sustain itself in the future.
Thank you. I mean, I think this is obviously the application for next year, and obviously this year has knocked the entire world slightly off kilter in terms of what we can demand. Perhaps it's something, if we go ahead with the new committee structure, that the whole bid process and how they work can go on to an agenda to look at, and that we might look at perhaps having a more in-depth process for the large bids, where perhaps those committees work particularly more closely with the organisations that are bidding, and you have more conversations beforehand about what they're bidding for, why it's for, and what information we require from them. But that would be something to hand on to the new committee structure, perhaps.
Can I just say that I would completely agree with that. It's not sort of slamming the door in people's faces at all, but if it is a worthwhile project, as I believe this is, you know, I enjoy seeing the Christmas lights, then helping people go through that funding application process is part of what I believe we should be doing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Voss.
Okay. So everyone around this table does a lot and has done a lot, but I'm pretty sure I'm any person who's ever sweated blood, tears to raise money in substantial amounts for one of these two organisations. So my comments are going to overlap without preempting Stratford in Bloom with Stratford Lights as well. I spent 2 to 3 years trying to sweat serious funds and monies from a professional fundraising organisation, Immediate Solutions, doing it myself, chasing monies up in virtually a full-time way. And I would get to a very modest £16,000–17,000 a year. And I will tell you now, those organisations that provided that sort of large sponsorship are just not able to so do. Now, if these two organisations, in whatever format they are at the moment, do not get these grants, and that applies from the town trust as well, the responsibility for lights and for flowers will come back to one of the councils, and it will not be the district council. They will have no interest in it at all. It will come to the town council. And that will either mean incurring additional expense at town council for employing people, or around this table now, 1, 2 or 3 people are going to have to spend a considerable amount of time raising the funds and the organisation that's involved in making these two excellent bodies work. It's interesting that there's £130,000 in total that they need between them, and that is a lot of money. So there is some merit in discussing at some point with the organisations how they're going to move forward. But certainly that's going to take some time to evolve. And when you have on committees people who are capable of filling in grant forms, and that's no reflection upon anybody at all, and bear in mind that this is a town council grant form and every grant form differs, you've got to spend an incredible amount of time if you want to do it in detail. And I will tell you this as well. I spent 1 year, hours and hours and hours, and I can send you and show you the detail I spent doing exactly what you said, Councillor Curtis, backing up to every dotted I and crossed T. And I came into the town council and it wasn't even discussed or raised. So I spent hours and hours doing it. Now it's a two-way street, this, isn't it? It's not just about the organisation filling out those forms and going through the detail. It's about the town councillors fully respecting the work that's been done and doing the work beforehand to analyse and question. So I'm 100% behind these grants. We give what we are able to. I think the town trust, it's nothing to do with me, has got to have some extremely good reasons not to do so, because without the lights and the flowers, we become a Milton Keynes, concrete roundabouts with nothing going on. And by the way, you'll never quantify what it brings in. And it's not just about bringing in revenue and return for the businesses. It's about how the residents of the town feel when they see those flowers, those hanging baskets, those beds and those lights. I think that probably falls under the town trust category of well-being, actually. So I'm not sure what's gone on there. So I'm absolutely for it. I think something needs to be worked on with both organisations. Stratford and Bloom we're going to hear about shortly. But £130,000 is a lot of money, and that's their cumulative grants and their fundraising, and that maybe they need more support, not less support, I would say.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I believe you had your... Yes.
Yeah, just in a way, just responding to a couple of points that have been made. One is the town trust are absolutely fully supportive of Stratford Christmas lights and Stratford in Bloom when we come to it, but they don't have the money this year to give them any finances. That's one of the issues. I think if there had been if it had been give us some money or that a non-starter, then I'm sure the town trust would have stepped in there. But I just don't take the fact that they haven't given them any money in any way as being they are not interested. They are absolutely fully supportive, and steps had already been put in place that going forward there would be a liaison between the town council and the town trust, and the actual grant application would have been considered by the town trust because they are the people who are much more familiar with considering grant applications. So David's point, Councillor Curtis' point about the standard of the application, that would have been in future, I'm hoping, will be picked up by the town trust. One other thing is, and they've got the Stratford Christmas lights, they've got a new chair, Matthew Coombs. He's very positive, he's very open to ideas and future ongoing dialogue. I don't think there'll be a problem. So if we do have some concerns about the whole Christmas lights, there will be a real positive discussion there. And finally, can I just ask Deputy Town Clerk, at this meeting, are we just agreeing the money to go into the budget as opposed to actually agreeing the grant? And there's slightly subtly different things here. So presumably we could put the money in the budget and then have a subsequent discussion. And if it goes to one of the other committees, they could have a more in-depth look at the application and decide what to do.
Yeah, the process in the past tends to have been that after the Finance and Scrutiny Committee are met at this time of the year, as well as agreeing the grants to put in the budget, that the organisations are actually notified of their grant award. But if the committee this time is saying that in principle they agree to put the sums in the budget, but subject to detailed review further down the line, then that would obviously have to be communicated to the organisations. Because that essentially it's forward planning. They need to know what, as far in advance as possible where they're going to get the money from. So as you say, it is these grant applications are for next year. You know, the town council has already committed to award the grants for 2020-21, and that money has been signed off. So yeah, there's if tonight the committee wants to recommend the sums for the budget process, but subject to further detailed review, then I don't see that that's necessarily an issue.
Right, thank you. Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I know, I can understand exactly that we need, that the grant application itself needs looking at.
Okay.
And sorry, bear with me.
Gasp pain, not a natural pause.
Yes, apologies. Bear with me. When would the first committee be looking at this budget, and when would it be paying out? Having the organisations having to wait on that budget decision is going to be actually rather difficult, actually, I believe, for both of them. There is forward planning that has to happen. I do it for Christmas lights example. We would have to know what we're organising for the following year, and we'd have to know before we do switch on this year, which is why in the past they've always been notified immediately that the grant has been accepted. What I'd like to propose is that this year, because it's difficult having emergency meetings with COVID, etc., can I suggest to council that this year we keep it as it has been, whereas in this committee makes the decision tonight to grant or to not grant the what's been requested by Lights and by Stratford in Bloom, and then one of the first agenda items on the new committee structure is to discuss the changes of grant applications. It means that the two organisations still get the money as they are desperately in need of it, and it also gives us as a council time to go through the grant application correctly and without rushing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Curtis, you had blue hand.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to come back, I think really I really don't want to come over as some sort of party pooper on this at all. Quite the opposite. But I think going forward, it's highly likely that money is just going to be in very, very short supply for all sorts of projects, both nationally and locally. And I think we need, as a council, we should be making funding decisions based on evidence, rather than a sort of, well, we've always funded this or we've always funded that. We need to make funding decisions based on evidence that's presented before us in order to be able to justify those decisions to the wider public. So if if a particular grant is refused and another grant is rewarded, we can say, well, this grant met these criteria, it met the public good criteria, it met this, that and the other, or this application met it, this application didn't.
They're not playing very well.
We need that clear evidence to be able to do that.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think I agree with you, but I think we need to have that process in place. And I think for this round, it would be unfair, having had the bidding process open at the 99th last second, to say, oh yes, but we're going to change it, so we're just going to apply a different set of rules to what you which are different to what you've just applied on the basis of. So I think for this round, I think it would be appropriate to stick with the process we have in place and decide on the bid that has been given to this meeting to discuss and decide on. I agree that, one always, when one is, husbanding public funds, one needs to make sure that the disbursement of those funds are done in an appropriate and as an intelligent way that one can do it. But I think to apply a process that we haven't actually decided to onto a bid that's just come in at this point would not be fair. So I think that we would, all the bid applications that come in for discussion at this meeting, I think we are in a position essentially where we are deciding, looking at the request that has come in for that bid and deciding as we have done in the past. I think I addressed, Councillor Voss, did you have your hand up?
I do, yeah,
right.
I just wanted, sorry, to come in quickly. I agree with you there, Chair. I agree with Councillor Alcock. I think this is, we should support and we should endorse these two grants. And I would say that in the new year, that is when we should apply ourselves to supporting positively these two organisations. So when we sit down in our committee and look at that, we should be coming up with a degree of energy and enthusiasm and commitment to working with these two. It's no use turning up at a committee and saying, well, I think we should do this and I think we should do that. And why haven't they done that? But we can all do that. And those of us who've been in management positions got up to our eye teeth with hearing that from people who never did anything positive to support it. So I would say come the new year, if you want to see changes and positive changes, then you stick your hand up and you contribute, because a lot of these committees do not have those skills. And if we think we've got those skills to help move them forward in the right way, so that they can either raise more money or they can justify these applications, that we should do. Because otherwise we will find ourselves shortly. And by the way, when it sat with the councils before, one of the reasons why it was taken away or moved out was because they didn't have those skills.
Right.
So, you know, we're going to have to work really hard, but today we should approve this money, give them the funds so that they can move forward, and come 2021, we should start applying ourselves seriously to how we want to, and we've got the money available, and that's what we get from the precept. We're not like a commercial organisation. We're not shutting down. We know, because we've looked at the accounts and we know what Phil's figures are. We know what we're getting, and it's there to be spent, frankly, as well, not just to be hoarded. So I would really positively suggest we say yes this year.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. It's really, I just want to put this debate into a little bit of context. So just got some questions for you, Deputy Chair, not Chair. I'm completely slipped. Anyway, Phil, sorry. How many grant applications do we receive each year?
The two main ones that we receive for over 20,000 are the two that we've received this year. Last year we had a grant application from the Fred Winter Centre, which required a long-term commitment, so the decision was made for the life of this council that a grant would be awarded for the next 5 years towards that. But those are the only grant applications we get, those three, if you like, those three, and the only ones for over £20,000.
Okay, I mean, in terms of smaller grants, how many applications do we typically get?
Because the town trust are the grant awarding body, we no longer accept grant applications for monetary sums from any other organisation. The other grant application process is for free use of the town hall.
Excellent, thank you very much. And just to say, I will be supporting both these applications.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Yeah, just to rebut Councillor Voss's comments, is that the money is not there just to spend. We have a duty to do that responsibly, but by spending this money, we're stopping us from doing something else. Like we have or either that or we increase the precept. So that as a famous politician says, there is no magic money tree.
We get quite a lot of magic money from our residents, and we should be looking to give it back to them wherever possible. So it's not as simple as I said, and nor would I want it to be seen to be that. But there's no fun in sitting at the end of the year and not having spent the money and thinking, oh, that's clever, we've retained it. This is for our residents principally, and it does then help knock-on effect business and visitor attraction.
Yes, well, knowing my colleagues as I do, I'm sure that we will not have the slightest problem in identifying suitable projects on which to spend the money we raise sensibly. Councillor Dowling.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure that the new councillors will know that this is actually resolved that item by the Stratford District Town Council, that we will support both these organisations in perpetuum. So you're going to have to go back through some old papers to change that. You'd have to go through full council to change the fact that we wouldn't be supporting them. The amount of the grant is not fixed, but I think that we've discussed going forward to different committee as well. That's something for the future. That committee structure hasn't been reset yet, and these grants, and it's only one we're talking about at the moment. The next one comes on. It's for £30,000, and it's for the next financial year. And I think that we should get on with granting it to them and let them get on with making their financial arrangements for 21-22, and then if needs be, and it does go to a different committee, then they can discuss and sort out all those things that have been mentioned tonight for the next round of applications. But I think we've discussed this now for at least 30 minutes, and we really ought to get on with. And I'd like to propose that we accept and we give Stratford Christmas Lights a grant of £30,000 for the next financial year, which is 21-22.
Thank you, Councillor Dowling. You're lovely. You saved me asking for a seconder as well. Super. Could I have everybody's vote, please? Okay, I think we are there. Do you have them? Town clerk. Right, thank you very much. Right, the next item on the agenda is Stratford-in-Bloom, who have requested a grant application. They have asked us to consider a grant of £34,500, which is an increase of £4,500 from the bid awarded in 2021. But as I think I recall, again in that time they asked for a slightly higher grant, which we rejected and stayed at the 30,000 grant. I think if we could discuss this one with specific detail to the organisation and the amount requested, I think we have had a full and detailed discussion on the process that we're going to do as we go forward. But if we could focus actually on the question of this grant, do I have any comments or questions regarding this one? Yes, Councillor Howe.
I guess my only question is what additional are they planning to do with the increase in the grant?
Thank you. Councillor Fradgley and Gina.
Hello. Gina would like to speak at the moment.
Yep,
about that.
Gina Lodge. I filled in the application form. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. We'd like to continue what we've been doing over the last few years, but we'd also like to be able to provide baskets for Sheep Street. And the only reason we need more money to buy the baskets, but we've been waiting on Warwickshire County Council to put new sockets in so that our poles, which we've already got, can be inserted down the road to hold the baskets.
Right.
We also used to put hanging baskets in Mother Street, but the lampposts there have failed the stress test. So there again, we need Warwickshire County Council to strengthen these lampposts, the arms that go across, so that we can put the baskets on there. They're very heavy because they have water containers in the bottom of them. So those are the two big things that we'd like to do to improve the town to start with anyway. We're not thinking of cutting back like Christmas lights next year, but we just would like to increase in these two areas particularly. If anyone's got any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Fordrick, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, no, not really any questions. Just to say again, I think this particular summer, this year with Stratford-in-Bloom has just demonstrated how important Stratford-in-Bloom actually is to the town of Stratford, particularly with the amazing displays in the town centre, which without which the town would have been much poorer visually, and I think it's given a lot of pleasure to Stratford residents, and it is for Stratford residents, but visitors obviously get the benefit of that as well. And again, I believe that a more attractive town, particularly during the months when the flowers are blooming, gives the town the edge over many other towns in the district and beyond, that brings the extra business into it as well. So it's something that's been done over the last 40 or 50 years, if you go back in to sort of, I mean, the borough council were growing its own plants at where the butterfly farm was years ago, and they were being planted all over Stratford. So Stratford in Bloom is just another form of what councils have been doing, particularly in Stratford, have been doing for decades. So it's really important for the town council to support it through the precept that that the residents pay, and yeah, I'll be voting for it.
Thank you. Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this year, I think above any other year, has shown the importance of organisations like Stratford in Bloom for our town. Now, we've got currently the major gardens of our town, as in the Shakespeare properties, major gardens that are currently all closed with no date currently of when they could open again. I know from speaking to residents, from messages I've received myself, people who don't have gardens themselves to enjoy in flats, etc., do take they get a lot of enjoyment and a lot of positive mental health from walking around our town and seeing what Stratford and Bloom have done. It's important that we continue to support them.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I think my internet's dodgy as well, which isn't helping either. I would like to say I will support this grant application, and I would hope others would too.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'm sure you all have read the Bridging the Gap and the piece in there about the makeup of the committee. I just, Councillor Fradgley, were you going to mention, is there an update on any progress with finding new committee members? I mean, clearly, if they don't get the money, then nobody's going to step forward to stand on the committee. So I think there's a bit of, needs to be clear that it needs to be in place for new people to come forward.
Can I just say, actually, that is an issue which the committee, namely Sue English, Gina Lodge and myself, are looking into at the moment. We're in a slightly awkward position that the existing chair, who has done a fantastic job over the last few years, is... Ooh. They're moving. She and her partner are moving actually forward. I know Mr. Mayor has actually done some work with the newspapers. We do have one or two leads to start bringing people in. It would be very, very difficult indeed. So I do hope that you'll see your way to granting this, and perhaps some of the skills that Councillor Ross talked might come on board in an interim period to get the committee completely up and running again. Can I just say, on the Bloom doesn't just put the blooms on around town, it runs competitions for residents. Every as you very well know, in the town actually enters the front garden competition. People can enter the back garden competition. Prizes are given for bee-friendly gardens. There is a considerable buzz around the town for people who actually want to enter these competitions. It all awards, and this year it's going to be virtual awards. And it also runs a community project every year. And I must say, a few years ago, the community project that I was particularly interested in, which was FOSS, Friends of Stratford Station, was supported initially by Stratford in Bloom. It's now independent and separately funded. So it actually found its feet, but it wouldn't have been there without the support of Stratford in Bloom. Stratford in Bloom has also actually produced sensory gardens and gardens in various homes around town. So it does have its fingers into the community, as well as the display in the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fradgley. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you. Yes, I like. Is the buzz around the town from the bees, Jenny? You know, I think the Stratford and Bloom is terrific. I've enjoyed judging and going around and chatting to people in their front gardens. Just a query: was the grant application actually? Is it in the appendices? I can't actually. Is it?
Yeah, Sib. It's right. The very top one, I think, in the appendices.
My apologies.
I beg your pardon. It's not B1 and B2.
Yeah.
In the appendices.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely. Councillor Dyer, could you unmute? There we go. You're there. Sorry, Councillor Dyer, I think you're still muted. That's it.
That's it. Great stuff. Sorry about that. Is it going to be partly photographic next year like it was this year? I went round some gardens taking photographs. I remember that.
Yes, I think we were encouraged to take photographs last year as well. So I would hope so. Yes.
Yeah, those photographs are put into a compendium of a loop, so that they will go up onto a YouTube presentation, so people can actually see those photographs repeating.
Okay,
I believe
that
was the presentation.
Right.
Presentation.
I don't have any new hands up, so can I? Oh, yes, we do. Councillor Voss.
So I think one of the problems we've got with Stratford and Bloom, and to some extent with Christmas lights, is the organisation, structure and support for the committees. And we all know, because we've all been involved, from schools to voluntary groups, let alone having enough and good people, as we are, to council. And with all the sorts of pressures that exist on working families, even retired people who you would have expected mainly to have stepped forward nowadays, not just because of the pandemic, putting committees together and having, and I'll come back to what I said before, having competent, capable and committed people working on these committees is getting tougher and tougher and tougher. So I think in the new year, we are going to have to look long and hard again at how we support and whether or not Stratford and Bloom and Christmas lights need to have some sort of reform, and whether we will be the people behind and organising and supporting that. Because if they do go, it will either come back to us and the pressures will be huge then, or else there will be no flowers. And that's been pretty close on a couple of occasions, as Councillor Frangley knows, and nobody wants to see that. And I think supporting this grant is essential, but we need to be looking in the new year with a very serious eye to how we can get the best and support both Stratford in Bloom and Christmas lights.
Thank you. Right. Okay, so I think we are now fully discussed. Can I please ask, excuse me, there's actually two parts to this item. Deputy Town Clerk, you correct me if I'm wrong. Essentially, we have been asked to support Stratford in Bloom with a grant of £34,500. I think there's been no discussion about the increase from last year, so presumably no one wants to raise that as a separate issue. So can I please ask councillors if they are prepared to note this application from Stratford and Bloom and give their assent or not?
To note, sorry, Chair, to approve.
Well, we're to note that the increase sees 4,500, and we are being asked to consider the grant. So do we need that proposed and seconded? Okay, can I ask for a proposer then, please, first? Okay, Councillor Philip Howe. Can I ask for a seconder, please? Councillor Voss, thank you very much. Can I please have your votes on this item? Lovely, thanks very much. Okay.
I think it goes in and out actually.
Okay, moving on. Deputy Town Clerk, do you want to take back your report from me to consider the Fred Winter Centre?
Yeah, the report was that was really just to note that the particular item was discussed last year, and because of the requirement for a long-term business plan, there was the commitment for the life of this council to support that project. Just the additional note was that further funding is now required due to a shortfall, but that will be coming to the town council meeting at the end of this month. So it's just, that item is just really for members to note.
Okay, so item 2, to note the amended procedure for grant requests for free use of the town hall. Okay, so this will be going to the new committee structure, and obviously nothing has been distributed this year to any of the groups because obviously the town hall has been out of action due to the lockdown, the COVID-19 restrictions. So we will be passing these decisions and grant applications to the Heritage and Events Committee. Okay, so that is merely to note for us. Yeah, okay. Do you wish to just quickly take us over the external audit and annual return?
Sure. Just an update on that. Again, as it said in the report, the external audit papers got submitted. They were just a month behind the normal schedule, although we actually had we were given the opportunity for a delay of up to two months. I've had acknowledgement that the external auditors have received the papers, but there has been no further response since then. They need to have got back to us by the end of November. So as and when we hear any more, obviously councillors will be informed. But the period of the notice for public rights, which was issued as part of the process, that actually ends next week, and to date we've had no requests by any member of the public for further information about the accounts.
Okay, and also we are item 4, to receive management accounts for the period 1st of April 2020 to 31st of July 2020. I think really one notes that the landscape has changed completely, and although we are now somewhat adrift from our anticipated budget before the event of lockdown, obviously income has changed, expenditure has changed, but the change from this period to the previous period of the management accounts is not great. It is going on in the same way, but obviously we have to bear in mind that it is different from our projected budget for this year. Does anybody have any notes or questions about the management accounts that have come through?
Councillor Voss.
Councillor Voss.
Yeah, there was a point raised about the drop in revenue unexplained for cemetery, for burials, and it said that needs to be investigated, I think, or it was unexplained. There's clearly some concern there.
Sorry, just to respond to that, it was more a case of the concern. Sorry, the reason that was highlighted is that the income is significantly down on previous year, and it would appear that last year, I don't know whether it's as a result of the fact that the cemetery space is being used up, so to speak, but it would appear that there were a lot of purchases of graves in advance of a requirement for their use, so to speak. With the budget having been based to some extent on previous year's income, we are down on budget, but then if you look back at the trend, I think last year was an exceptional year. We're looking back at previous years, the income was lower, but for this year, it's still down on what we've receive in the past. So I think the situation, if you like, in other parts of the country, I'm sure that other authorities have experienced a rise in deaths at this time, but that doesn't appear to have been the case here locally, which is obviously good news.
And are you suggesting it's possibly a budgeting issue, that we over budgeted in terms of anticipation? So is that what you're suggesting also?
Yeah, on the basis we did, it was apparent when the budget was set that last year was an exceptional year. I think the budget was pulled back more in line with previous years, but we're not, if you like, it's a budgeting issue in the forecast that we've put in place in reality hasn't been realised, and there's no obvious reason for that other than, you know, it's difficult to predict how many people will be purchasing either graves or memorials.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Dyer. Sorry, Councillor Dyer, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great stuff. I had actually a reason to go through the cemetery today and its Tranquility Garden. And you can see there's a hell of a lot of places have been pre-booked and presumably paid for. And this is why perhaps the income is dropping, because people who wanted the reserve one in advance has already bought it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Thank you. Okay, I don't have anybody else's blue hand up, so can I please ask you to note this report of management accounts? Thank you. Noted. Okay, item 5 on the open report is the reserves policy. Last year we had an overhaul of the reserves policy. It is amended as part of the budget process. It is reviewed as part of the budget process, because obviously the decisions one takes in reviewing it have an effect on budgeting and what decisions one makes. You have had a latest version circulated as Appendix F. And obviously the town clerk's very kindly elaborated in notes of what and the whys and the wherefores. There will be a query going forward if we go to the new committee structure. Something that we will need to consider is if we are assigning budgets to committees, whether we are going to assign reserves. And I think if this goes forward, this is something we're going to have to look at fairly seriously, and because of the requirement to manage and conserve reserves. The other issue that is raised, there's something that I need to take from the reserves policy into our budget setting process is, obviously we have done a considerable amount of work internally and externally, and more is planned to the town hall in order to maintain the integrities of the building. And we need to plan into our budgeting process the replenishment of reserves. So I would suggest that as part of our budgeting process and based upon our financial reserves policy, that we also consider the necessity to manage, maintain and refresh reserves when they are used up. We obviously have budgetary issues that will arise due to the fact that we have reduced income, some reduced expenditure. We may find we have new requests coming to us to consider as a result of the COVID crisis and other related issues. And I think that we need to maintain our view of how we maintain and refresh our reserves as part of that. Having said that, this is part of the budgeting process, and we are looking at a review of the reserves policy. So can I ask if anyone has any issues or queries regarding the actual policy wording and what we are proposing itself. Okay, not everyone's such an anorak on reserves as me. This is excellent news. Councillor Howe.
Just a quick question on as we're likely to create new designated reserves for the new committee structure. I think that was mentioned. Do we feel like it's probably sensible to take out the explicit designated reserves out of the policy and just to say they exist, or do they need to be in this actual document?
Can I ask Deputy Town Clerk if you
Okay, so are you sorry? Are you sort of saying so to avoid having to update the policy every year?
Yes,
reserves are there,
effectively.
we
Yes.
just say there are a number of designated reserves. Yeah. No, yeah, I'm happy to make that change if members believe.
Yeah, I think we want to. I think having more designated reserves is I think is going to be better, and committees will have a better idea of what our financial situation is, and then I think we need some quite within the budget setting process some flexibility to create them for a purpose, to give them to a committee to look after and to spend, and at some point we need to look at replenishing them as the chair said.
Right, Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair. Can I check, you're not thinking about trying to split the designated reserves we already have ring-fenced for certain projects? Because I'm not 100% sure exactly how that would work. Because obviously we have things already ring-fenced for the town hall building work, and also for work at the cemetery, etc. I'm just not quite sure exactly how we would go about splitting them.
I don't think that is the intention at all. I think responsibility for a particular area goes to a committee, and that designated reserve associated with that responsibility would go with it, as I understand it.
Yeah, just actually thinking back to my previous response to Councillor Howe, I realised the reason why the designated reserves currently are stipulated those are the ones that appear in the financial statements each year. So, if you like, those are ring-fence reserves that council have put in place for ongoing purposes. So, in that respect, I think perhaps it's as well to leave them in the reserves policy, because that then links the policy back to the financial statement. To answer Councillor Alcock's query, the intention is not to split those across the subgroups, but to create new designated reserves for funds that are available to those subgroups, assuming the new committee structure is approved, so that they then, having set their budget, essentially have a facility for further funds to be available for other projects which they may identify, to save the process of having to revisit the budget or come back to the Finance and Audit Committee or Scrutiny Committee, whatever is in place at the time. So yes, it's not to try and split what is currently there, it's actually to create new well, not ring-fence reserves, but new designated reserves specifically for those subgroups.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Town Clerk.
Thank you. Councillor Lee?
Yeah, I mean, looking at the policy, I think it's fine as it is. I fully support the keeping of the reserves as they currently are. There is clearly wording in there which allows designated reserves to be created for special projects, which certainly accommodate what Councillor Howe allows for. We will be obviously looking at this next year again. If we need to adjust the list of reserves on there based upon what may be a different committee structure, let's do that then.
Deputy Town Clerk, are we simply being informed of this, or do you require us to accept this policy as it is going forward? Do you need us?
It was really as part of the budget process. I know last year when we when we had both the reserves policy and the budget process on the same agenda, it was a bit of chicken and egg as to which you discuss first. So I think if council are happy that the reserves policy is adequate or is fit for purpose going forward, then we need to be aware that in the budget process that follows, we need to ensure that the budget that is agreed follows the policy that's in place.
Right.
We can't subsequently then agree a budget that ignores the reserves policy that is currently.
Right, lovely, thank you. Okay. Right, so again with the general reserve, your discussion within the general reserves policy item number 5, this again is for our information, feeding into the budget process and ensuring we're following appropriate.
Yeah. I think if members are happy with the policy, I guess if proposed that the policy remains unchanged, as Councillor Lee has pointed out, if you like, that the wording currently allows for additional reserves to be created for special projects. So in that sense, it is generic enough to accommodate any changes going forward. And if subsequently the new committee structure requires some changes, then it can be looked at, if you like. The policy can be revisited before the end of the year.
Okay.
But in terms of fulfilling the requirement to review the policy on an annual basis, then if members agree, if it's recommended to approve the policy as it now stands, then that's fine.
Okay, so perhaps in that case, I can ask members to agree that they are happy with maintaining the policy as it stands.
Just out of interest, does it require somebody to propose and seconder?
Can I ask?
Yes, any
your
vote in the council
on that?
requires a proposer and seconder.
Very well. Can I ask for a proposer, please?
I'm happy to propose.
Thank you. Can I have a Councillor Lee to second? Thank you. And again, can I have your votes? Lovely. Thank you. Yes, okay. Okay. Item 6, again, are you requiring, you give us information, are you requiring a decision from us?
So
No.
the report here is really the finance committee would give a steer to the spending the other spending committees as part of the budget process, which needs to happen now over the next 3 to 4 months. So as the report says, for the last number of years, the approach has always been to only request funding for known requirements, and it's really for the committee now to consider whether they're happy to proceed with that approach or whether they have any specific instructions they would like officers and other committees to follow when considering the budget for next year.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Voss.
Yes, Deputy Town Clerk, would it be helpful if you could send us a process for the budget strategy, timetable, and how we approach it, where we start, what we should be considering, just to clarify, bullet point, little critical path maybe?
Yeah, if you like, just as a quick high level now, the normal process will be this committee will meet again in November, but under the existing structure, the other two spending committees would actually meet in October, in the next 2 months, so that they will have had an opportunity to discuss their budget requirement to put back to finance in November. If there are any concerns over requests for funding, if the finance committee sort of push back and ask for further information or say that the funds are not available, then there is a further opportunity in meetings in December, with the budget needing to be signed off by, well, to be recommended to council by finance in January, and at the end of January, town council needs to approve the budget in order to request the precept of the district council. So the deadline for next year's budget is the end of January.
I think the question is, as we are in the process of changing to a new committee structure and with potentially not hard projects perhaps quite ready for that, whether we have a sufficient structure in place with this to accommodate the new requirements. Do you think that we are sufficiently covered with this existing process to accommodate the new system if the issue arises? I mean, are you comfortable that you can accommodate this change within the structure you have here?
It's difficult to say, because if the committee structure obviously wasn't changing, the process generally is, as part of the setting of the proposal for the new budget is very much based on the previous year's budget. Things tend to, there are certain things that we know happen year on year. If you like, the exceptional additional costs also tend to be fairly consistent. For example, the grant awards that we've discussed earlier in this meeting, we know about those year on year. The last few years, the major significant additional expenditure items have related for a long period of time related to the neighbourhood plan, which went on for a number of years. That was all funded out of reserves. And the Tranquility Garden project also went on for a number of years, and that again was an exceptional item, but again, all the funding required for that came from reserves. So in terms of the budget process, essentially, if you like, without any other guidance and without knowing what other projects may be on the horizon, then the budget will be set based on this year's budget. And it really then comes down for committees to flag up any additional exceptional items that haven't appeared in previous years. It's obviously, I'm not in a position to sort of second guess what councillors might be considering. All I can say, if you like, is that because of the level of reserves in the past, it has been relatively straightforward to accommodate additional spending requests by committees, because we have had general reserves available to cover that. The concern will be if the new committee structure results in a lot of new projects and new initiatives being introduced, then given that there is a significant draw on reserves over for the last year and again this year for the town hall maintenance, the concern really will be that going forward we can't constantly assume that there are plenty of reserves to cover any additional items. So really it's a case of, if members are aware that there are some initiatives that will require funding, is to put a process in place as part of the budget. For example, just a very simple example, the vehicle replacement reserve was created because while the vehicles still work, there was no requirement to replace them. But by putting a sum of money aside every year over a period of time, it then doesn't become an issue that if one of the cemetery vehicles requires replacing, we suddenly have no money set aside to do that, and would then, for example, have to raise the precept by 10% to cover the cost of a new vehicle. I think the key thing shown in some of the appendices with the report is that, as we saw last year, a 1% rise in the precept rate it raises £5,000. So in the grand scheme of things, if somebody comes forward with a proposal for a £50,000 project, that potentially is a 10% rise on the precept to cover that, which might not be, if you like, within the realms.
Right. So a certain rigour is required in the new committee structure, if it goes ahead, over the next couple of months to ensure that we wind our necks in and take due regard to the change in the financial circumstances, and to have a realistic plan for proposed projects within a reason, within this framework, so that suitable adjustments and discussion can take place. Okay. Councillor Dowling.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Town Clerk. But of course, you've got to remember, members, that we also have a hell of a lot of new houses going up, and we have it's not called the new homes bonus, but that's what I'll refer to it as. So rather than raising the precept, we do get rather a lot of extra money in from all the new houses. So that needs to be taken into consideration after such a difficult year, if we want to ask our residents to pay more and up the precept. So it really does, need looking at. We really can't be raising the precept by 10. We can't raise it by 10% anyway because of government rules. But we certainly need to take into consideration everything before we ask our residents to give us any more money at all. Thank you.
I think we would all agree with that, and that's certainly a principle that we will have to take into our decision-making process with regard to new projects and projected budgets this autumn. Councillor Voss.
Yeah, I think we did have expenditure due to COVID, and were we, I'm not saying we should, consider raising the precept to recover that expenditure. We might also wish to remind our residents, let alone the district council, that their failure to perhaps show good faith vis-a-vis Robert Jenrick's letter, we have to restore those funds. And one way of doing it would be by raising the precept. I think that would be legitimate, reasonable and fair. I've no doubt the district council will be raising the precept in the region of 2 to 3%, as they're allowed to do. We may also need to look at that this year in particular because of the unanticipated and unexpected expenditure, which we were perfectly reasonable in assuming was going to be supported through the letter we received from Robert Jenrick. So I think there is a door open, a window open, if we wanted to raise the precept this year.
Thank you. Councillor Howe?
I just asked the Deputy Town Clerk what the timing is with the precept setting, because there's from memory, I think we had to agree the increase before or very soon after getting the tax base for the year.
Yeah, we're normally notified of the tax base. I think it's in December.
Yeah,
and the budget has to be the budget and the precept request have to be submitted by the end of January. So a lot of the, if you like, the initial budget work is typically done assuming the tax base is unchanged, because otherwise we're basing sorry, one back slightly. In previous years, when I've prepared the budget, I've always used the starting point as assuming the precept will be unchanged from the current year, because until we know the tax base, and if we take the approach from previous years that we don't, the town council doesn't increase the charge per bandy property, then, if you like, in my view, the best basis to go forward is to assume that the precept will be unchanged from the current year. Typically, it will, even without increasing the cost, the charge per bandy property, typically we will receive slightly more money because the tax base increases. What we saw last year, though, is that the council tax reduction grant had gradually been phased out by the district council. So the increase that we received through an increase in the tax base was actually netted off by a loss of the council tax reduction grant. So actually, last year the precept was only very slightly greater than the year before. So as you say, there is a very short window between confirming what the tax base is and determining where, the impact of that on the precept that we will receive if we leave it as it was.
Can we write to the district council for some form of any indication of advance notice, because I know that this committee made previous comments last year about this, all the house building that was going on, and the tax base would increase, and I noticed it increased by 35 last year, and so is there, is the tax base going to increase by hundreds and thousands over the next couple of years, or yeah, where is this coming from?
There are the district council sort of 5-year budget plan had got projected figures in, which I know I was provided with last year. But if you like, I did some work on using those projections to anticipate the impact on the precept. But in reality, the figures that they had used didn't come through. You know, it's one of the difficulties with forecasting, that it's all very well saying, yes, there is information out there where the district council have previously suggested that there would be, for example, another 1,000 homes coming through next year. But certainly in the last 2 years, it is apparent that the figures that have been put in their projections, which admittedly were set several years ago, have not come through. I can certainly ask if they've got any indication at this stage what it is likely to be. But
there's no harm in asking, is there? I think that would be very helpful.
And it would be helpful when we are formulating our plans over the next couple of months to make sure that we live, you know, we make fully informed decisions on projects that we decide we may wish or not wish to go ahead. Councillor Curtis. Sorry, could you unmute?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just ask the Deputy Town Clerk, Phil, when was the precept last raised?
it was last year. It was raised by.
Before that, sorry.
Oh, it hadn't been raised for about 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are just a few comments really. I mean, I absolutely agree with Councillor Voss, and I think Richard, perhaps there are a few things that you weren't saying either that I picked up. In terms of what the district council has or hasn't done with this funding from Gendrick. Personally, I mean, I think if we don't raise the precept, we are potentially building up a liability, or maybe liability isn't quite the right word, but building up more problems for us going forward. Most people are used to annual inflationary increases, and I don't see why the precept shouldn't follow a similar sort of pattern. And I think also, Phil, it would be very helpful, however difficult it may be, to have some type of forecast up to May 2023. Now, I know, you know, forward budgets are extremely difficult, but at least if we have some rough idea, particularly at the moment where there is so much financial uncertainty, if we do have some sort of forward budget going up to 2023, at least when there are major changes to that, we'll know about them. I always think it's far better to have a plan that can be changed and is flexible, that looks further ahead, than not to have a plan, you know, whether that's a financial plan or whatever else it is. So I think it would be very helpful to obviously have the forward budget as we normally do. But I think for this council, when we are thinking of additional expenditure, what we may wish to do before the next elections in May 2023, to have a budget that takes us an outline projection, if you like, or whatever you like to call it, that takes us that far ahead.
I think my comeback to that would be you point that in the current period of great financial uncertainty, it is helpful to have a future projection. My point would be that this year's budget has been completely blown out of the water by what's happened. So if I presented you with a 3-year plan a year ago, it would be completely and utterly incorrect by now. So it is I believe it is extremely difficult to, other than to give you, if you like, to give you a plan based on assume the precept rises by inflation for the next 3 years, and assume that expenditure on known items continues with inflationary rises, then any additional things are very difficult to allow for. For example, we budgeted to put, we were going to spend best part of 130,000 on the town hall this year, which was going to be a huge chunk out of the reserves. I think the budget actually shows that we were looking to use nearly £300,000 of reserves this year. The reality is we will, you know, if we'd raised a precept request based on, if we didn't have that in reserves and thought we were going to spend £300,000 additional money this year, then that would have required a significant rise in the precept. And then in reality, I suspect our deficit this year will be substantial, well, a fraction of that, because we haven't been able to proceed. I appreciate that this year has been extremely exceptional, but it is, other than I think to go with known costs and known income, it is very hard to put anything in place that won't immediately become out of date and inaccurate, if you like.
Can I just, Chair, can I just come back on that slightly? Phil, I wouldn't want you to get the impression at all that this is trying to sort of put you in a difficult position, far from it. But in a way, the fact that this has been such an exceptional year, if we have, say, a 3-year projection, then that allows us, I think, you know, to see, wow, heck, this has been an exceptional, you know, this has, you know, really hit us for 6. How can we then adjust over the next 2 to 3 years to allow for that? And I think that's my point really, is that if we've got that longer projection, if you like, when there are exceptional circumstances, and there may be another exceptional circumstance next year, I mean, we just don't know. I think, if anything, this crisis shows that all the time we think we're actually very, very secure, we're always walking on very, very thin ice and could fall through at any time. And I think that longer term projection would be, in a way, even more helpful, even if it gets blown out of the water. Right, we've got 3 years to get back on course. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Alcock. Okay, I'll come back to you. Councillor Foldrick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of points really. Obviously, COVID-19 has highlighted the fact that the council needs to have a reasonable amount in reserve. That's important, and obviously there's going to be, going forward, looking at the town council's ambitions on some increase in spending plans potentially, which in turn will obviously deplete reserves. That's not a bad thing, because I think why do councils have money? And that's to invest in their local communities, and I think that's really important. But I do think you've always got to keep an eye on the precept, and the precept at a minimum should always keep up with inflation, in my opinion, particularly if councils are more active in investing in schemes to benefit local communities. As a parish council, there is actually no limit on how much it can actually increase the precept. It's under the law, it can increase it by 1,000% if it chose. Potentially, that wouldn't go down very well with electors, I wonder. But it does have that flexibility to make good any deficiencies that happen that's out of its control when you have a pandemic. So it does have quite a lot of power to replace lost funds. So that's just a few comments, really.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Alcock, I think you've managed to come back online. Did you had a question?
I did. Thank you, Chair. Apologies for that, everybody. My internet drops out occasionally. Yes, just now I'm pretty sure Councillor Dowling will correct me if I'm wrong. He usually does, but I think we attempted the whole a 3-year prediction on budget in possibly my first year on the council. And what we discovered was that because of how we earn our money through the precept, it is very, very difficult to predict. For example, in my first 2 years of being on the council, we were told that 800 houses at Shottery were being built. Well, here we are, many, many years later, with not quite that number there. Last year, no, year before last, planning permission was granted for 500 houses on Bishopton. There's absolutely no sign of that starting, and no actual key of when it could start. So predicting how many houses are going to be built and predicting what the precept will be on those houses 3 years from now is just not possible to do. I say it has been tried in the past. We know what our expenditure is. We know the very basics of what our budget will be. That very rarely changes from year to year. The only thing that changes on it are larger projects. And as I believe, as Deputy Town Clerk said, we've already budgeted for them with a longer view in mind. So rather than coming and saying, right, I've got an idea for a project, it's going to cost £120,000 and I want to do it in the next 12 months, is being able to forward plan it for several years ahead and budget for it, just to ensure that the precept was there. Now, because of extra building we have had, around 5 years ago when Birmingham Road got a large development, etc., we ended up with additional money going into our reserves, which meant we could then move forward quicker on projects like the cemetery driveway, the Tranquility Garden, etc. So there's always that of not being able to predict the future and not knowing when exactly the building is going to start. One thing that this council has always excelled itself on is the fact that we can run to a tight budget. And that is what new committee structure will be also taking on, is that big projects won't be happening in the next 12 to 24 months. It will probably be longer than that, to 4 to 5 years. But everything that we wish to do for this council is possible, but predicting what's going to happen the next 2 years is just not going to be feasible at this current time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Actually, Councillor Wojtek answered the question that I was going to ask, which is, I'm pretty sure we are not restricted in the level of precepts we can raise, which I think was, but so that was just, I think Councillor Darling said we were, but I'm sure that we're not, so that's fine. Just picking up on the point about forward planning, I think the new committee structure will be really key here, because I think they will identify some big new projects that they would like to do and how we plan for those in the future. That will be part of that long-term planning. So I think we sit and wait and see what the new committee structure comes back with regarding new projects. It's fine. Yep.
Right, so thank you. Councillor Voss.
Yes, I'm going to make a prediction, and that is that a lot of what we've said tonight will become redundant, because when we go to unitary, one way or another we will. It's a serious point, and I know it's funny because we can make all the plans, and Councillor Kitts, I agree, I like a 3-year projection, and Deputy Town Clerk will know that I talked to him about this, but it's changed, and it is going to change, and I don't think we're going to be in the first tranche. So I envisage within 2 years, there is every likelihood that the structure of the Town Council, its responsibilities, accountabilities and finances will change, and those changes will be forced upon us as unitary comes along. So maybe an 18-month plan, Phil, would take us, but we're into known unknowns at the moment, aren't we?
Right, well, I think we'll stick to the next 2 months, which is where the new committees had better get their budgets together to form next year's budget, and then we'll see what the unitary fairy brings us in the fullness of time. Okay, so
Can I just ask whether the deputy town clerk? I think the deputy town clerk is asking us for a something here.
Yeah, it's whether it's if you've got any specific instructions or guidance to give as part of the budget process. I get from the conversation, I believe it is a case of carry on as
think
usual,
we are.
unless you identify any large projects, in which case you need to budget long term to pay for them and not assume that they can all be done in the next 12 months.
Do you just require agreement from us on that at this point?
I think so. If from the debate, if councillors are happy that you know, can carry on as usual, then if that's noted or recommended.
Okay, can we please note we'll carry on as identified in the town clerk's report. Noted procedure. Just missing a few still. Okay, Councillor Leing, if you could just, lovely, thank you very much. Great stuff. Okay, sorry, Deputy Town Clerk, if we could go over to your verbal report now.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things, really. It's following on from the internal audit review. I know we've talked about that at the last meeting. There were no matters of concern, but in the letter that we subsequently received, they acknowledged a couple of items that have been ongoing now. So the first one is regarding the rolling review of the asset register. So the good news here is that Councillor Lee has put a lot of time and effort into developing a new asset database, and we have recently managed to reconcile the figures and then the values in the new database with the figures that were agreed with the internal auditor as part of the audit this year. So it's my view we are now in a position to move forward using the new database, which has facilities for generating checklists of items on the asset register. And I know the asset register subgroup needs to potentially arrange another meeting, but it has previously, or pre-COVID, it was agreed that we would trial councillors going around their ward to tick off the amenities and street furniture and things like that that were within their ward. And if that, we do a sort of pilot run of a couple of councillors doing that, checking that the information comes back and the database can be updated accordingly. If that goes well, I think that will at least show the internal auditor that progress is being made. And they acknowledge that for the various reasons this hasn't happened is not an issue, but it would be good at next year's internal audit for them to acknowledge that progress has been made with that. So that's some good news. The other item, which again was on the internal auditor's letter, is just noted that it was agreed as part of the annual review of the risk register to put some more detail behind the risk register log. That was presented to the Finance Committee about 18 months ago. And then subsequently I was off long-term absence, which meant it wasn't progressed last year. This was noted, I think, at the meeting back in March, and it was suggested that we can now resume the work to review that. But again, I'm conscious that then COVID stepped in, so that has been put on ice. But again, it would be helpful if councillors could come forward and volunteer to help, if you like, with reviewing the risk register. And I have already discussed it with our health and safety consultant, who's obviously done work on the town hall fire risk register and things like that. So, but it will require, I think previously Councillor Dowling and Councillor Alcock had offered to do some work with that. So there are some certain items on the risk register that could probably be ticked off fairly quickly, but there are others that we need to put a plan in place to show that they are being reviewed, again on a sort of cyclical basis. So I will perhaps send an email around to members just to remind them of that and see if people are available to assist with that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, do you have any, that was your, okay. I have to apologise to Councillor Lee because I'm somehow managed to use an old copy of the agenda and I managed to leave his funding statement, which was actually item 9. So I do apologise, and if we could just ignore that mistake and go back to consider the addition to the agenda. Councillor Lee, do you think you could talk us through it?
Yeah, so I think I've got the same problem with an old agenda. It doesn't seem to be updated on the document site. But yeah, essentially, the story starts with the planning committee. So at the planning committee, which was held about 2 weeks ago, we had put forward to us an item which was to ask for any applications that the town council may want to make for SIL funding. So for anyone who doesn't know what SIL funding is, this is the community infrastructure levy. So any new development which takes place following adoption of the SIL statement, which I think was in 2018, is required to pay basically a fund into a community infrastructure levy fund, which is administered by the planning authority. So Stratford District Council hold this money. At the present, well, the latest report they had indicates a fund of over £200,000, and this money is designed to be spent basically in the communities. So we ourselves as a parish do receive part of the SIL money. So as we've discussed earlier, there is a SIL designated reserve, and if you look through the management kit accounts, there is a sum of thousands of pounds, 5,700 something, I think it is off the top of my head at present. But obviously, what the district hold the big purse, as it were. So what they have is a process whereby they ask organisations who are eligible to apply for the SIL funding to make effectively applications every year, and they will determine those applications based on the funding they have. So we understood that from the planning committee. I think it's probably the wrong committee for it to go to. So I think moving forwards, potentially with a new committee structure, we will address that next year. But suffice to say, the short of the story is the deadline for the applications is this Friday on the 11th. So that's how we learnt about it. In terms of what is being proposed, obviously Councillor Voss has spearheaded the development of the town centre task and finish group, and as part of those discussions, we've been really considering, well, what could we do with the town and how do we link this to the neighbourhood development plan. And in the neighbourhood development plan, there are very clear projects which set out how community infrastructure can be developed within the town centre. Because it's such a big topic, I think a reasonable start would be to focus on something specific and something we feel is deliverable. And in those discussions we've had as a task and finish group, we've identified potentially following project TC5, which is essentially looking at improving access around the town for pedestrians and cyclists and things like that. And very specifically within the project in the neighbourhood development plan is point A of that project, which covers Bridge Street. And also this ties in with what we've seen on Bridge Street during these COVID-19 times of having to reconfigure Bridge Street to enable better access for pedestrians. So in effect, we've almost trialled what was envisaged within the neighbourhood development plan as a potential project. So what is being proposed is that we have a project which looks at designing upgrades for Bridge Street to accommodate what is envisaged within the neighbourhood development plan. I've developed a specification for this work, and the idea is that this work would be done in conjunction with the newly formed Strategic Town Partnership, which had its first meeting, I believe, on Friday. So with this project in mind, and the project is essentially to say, design what could be on Bridge Street, essentially coming up with 3 different cases, and as is, but with enhanced pedestrian access, a shared space, or a full pedestrianisation. So that would give us basically some material to then go to public consultation on. So what we're proposing is to basically make an application for this SIL funding, to go to tender to a number of organisations who are involved in urban design and street planning, and to essentially ask them to come up with 3 concept designs for Bridge Street, which we could then put to the public and get their view as to how a future Bridge Street could look like. So it doesn't involve any actual infrastructure itself, it's more planning for it. So when we discussed this at the Task and Finish group, it was advised by the town clerk that this needed to have approval from the town council, and the Finance and Scrutiny Committee would be eligible to make that approval for the town council to make an application for a grant under this SIL funding. So what we propose is that we make an application which needs to go in by this Friday for a project to appoint a consultant to develop designs for Bridge Street.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Okay, Councillor Mackenzie.
I just want to say thank you for all the work that you've obviously done and put in for this. It sounds great. As there's such a short amount of time that we have to have it in, I'd certainly want to approve that and bring it forward.
Thank you. Councillor Fodrick.
It's a point of order, really. I've looked on the agenda on the original agenda, and then there was another agenda that was released a few days ago, and this wasn't on it either. So just a question where this particular item is on the agenda. Does anyone know?
Sorry, I thought I had an old one and it had become item 9. Certainly
it's my understanding, I was on leave last week, but I understand that when the summons was sent out, I think perhaps in the morning last Wednesday, this item wasn't on there, but it was added later in the day, and the agenda and notification were resent by email later on that day. It sounds from comments that maybe the meeting documents folder hasn't been updated with the revised agenda, but it was sent out actually last Wednesday, if you like, within the same 24 hours as the original agenda.
Yeah, I got another one which was emailed, but I haven't seen the agenda with item 9 on. So
oh, right,
I may have missed it.
It's not down as item 9. It's in the appendices as a SIL application Bridge Street, and it's there on the agenda. If you go to the appendices and look at that and go to the bottom of it, you'll find it's there on the appendices in the email that I got from the town hall.
Okay, I'm just thinking whether the process is correct or not. That's all.
I am aware that it was reissued, but I certainly, the copy I've got is dated the 2nd of September, and I was advised that it was sent out on the same day once this matter had been identified by the planning committee, I think.
Okay, I mean,
it would appear that the document on the website hasn't been updated, but certainly the public notice that I printed off today has got it on as item 9.
On the agenda, the SIL application came to me 7 hours ago, whereas the rest came on the 20th of August. It's on the at the bottom of the appendices, Jason.
Okay. I'll accept that, but like I say, it's.
You happy to accept that?
I haven't read anything about it, so.
You're
so
happy to accept that? Ish, happy.
Well, I don't know because I haven't seen it, so I'll have to rely on the deputy town clerk that it's all been done as it should be, I suppose, as procedure.
Sorry, can I also add in that no, actually, I haven't had the agenda with it on, and it's just Councillor Dowling saying then that I found the paperwork in the appendices. I've only just this moment seen it after refreshing my page that Councillor Dowling told me. So I'm also having an issue with this.
Okay, oh no. Well, the Deputy Town Clerk, I will need your advice on this, whether we can.
Well, so I was actually on leave last week, so I wasn't around to send the papers out, but I have been advised by the town clerk that this item needed to be added to the agenda, and it was done on the same day that the original agenda was sent out.
Can I?
Unfortunate if some of the members present haven't actually seen.
I ask my colleagues, were you aware and had you received? I was aware of it, having gone through, downloaded and printed stuff today. The question is, sorry, Councillor Foldryke, is that a new hand up? No, okay. Councillor Dowling.
Yeah, basically, Councillor Lee explained the situation perfectly. The only thing that we've got in here for those councillors who haven't seen it is the infrastructure funding statement, the application form.
Right.
And it basically tells me exactly the information that Councillor Lee has done so much work on. So I think that it's quite legal to carry forward with this item now. Catch up on it, but Councillor Lee has explained what it says on the form, basically about getting 3 quotes, 3 plans drawn up for a thing, and then obviously the decision will be made after that. So I don't see any reason to not discuss it, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just, sorry, Chair, I can just confirm I've now found the email. So the original summons and agenda was sent out on last Wednesday, the 2nd of September. And then the town clerk subsequently sent an email on the same day to confirm that it was actually to Councillor Lee, but the rest of the members of this committee, I think, were copied in. Oh, actually, it would, yeah, so it went to Councillors Curtis, Coles, Dowling, Wojcik, etc. It's saying the finance agenda has been amended to include consideration to submit a SIL application to SDC by the deadline. So I've certainly got an email, if you like, from the town clerk dated 1630. Sorry, it's last Wednesday, 1634. But looking at it, it's actually, I think it's not gone to all the members of the finance committee.
Right, but it is nevertheless the SIL application was in the appendix marked as item 9. Councillor, Mr. Mayor, you had your hand up.
So I was just going to say exactly what the deputy town clerk has said. Well, certainly I received the email saying that the appendix, the agenda had been changed, and I just assumed that it had been amended on the web, on the documents, but it hasn't been. But like I say, it didn't go to every member of the finance committee. So Councillor Howe didn't receive that email, but I did, and a lot of us did. It's just
right. Okay, on that basis then, and with thanks to Councillor Dowling for his contribution, I think we are happy to proceed with that. Do I have any other questions with regard to the actual form that anybody wants to address to Councillor Lee? Councillor Foldryke.
Yeah, I did receive that email. I've just seen, so thank you.
You've been lost in the doomed world of the change email. When
I know. It's just picking everything up as it comes along. But it's just a quick question on the SIL spending, really. And I think, Councillor Lee, you were saying that the district council are inviting sort of applications. Is that, my understanding, and I might be completely wrong, is that the money that the district council has for SIL infrastructure spending, they can spend as they please, or am I getting the wrong end of the stick?
I think they can, but what they obviously do is they have a process whereby bodies can apply. So there is a report which you can see where previous funding has been awarded. It also covers the section 106 and things like that. And notably, I saw the Ken Kennett Centre in there. So yeah, I think they seem to have a good process. The only people that seem to have applied for it previously are mainly Warwickshire County Council and the Environment Agency. So I think it's probably time that other organisations who have need or would like to see community infrastructure within their areas make applications. So yeah, I think you're right in that Stratford District Council can do that, but they've obviously put forward this process and will consider applications.
Thank you. Councillor Dowling.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's fairly straightforward, really. We're not making any particular decision at the moment. We're just giving, basically, we're asking the district council for planning permission for or getting the plans in. And then once the plans are in, I'm assuming that we'll all discuss it in great detail when we know exactly what's going on. So at the moment, we're just giving Councillor Lee the permission to carry on with the application, which fairly straightforward as far as I'm concerned. I think Councillor Lee's done a grand job. For us to poo-poo it and stop him from carrying on now seems a bit daft to me. So, I mean, if we don't like the plans, then we can certainly reject it at that stage. But at the moment, it's the application, and it's and we'll see the plans when they come in. And well done, Councillor Lee. Thank you very much.
Councillor Voss.
Yeah, just to endorse that, and of course, this was done almost as well as a test of the district council process in relation to SIL applications. So we should all have a vested interest to see how the district council react to this, whether they do so positively or negatively. And it has to be in by the 11th. So I think we should all, Councillor Dowling says, approve, let it move forward, and then we can discuss it in detail if it is approved.
Excellent. Well, I have one blue hand left, and then we can do a Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lee, thank you very much for your explanation. You helped me out when I was struggling with the paperwork. As such, I completely agree. I think it's an excellent idea. I think it's an excellent piece of work. Thank you very much for putting the hours in. Chair, could I please propose that we support this proposal going forward?
Thank you, Councillor Alcock. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Fordryke, thank you. Okay, and can I please have your votes on that? Oh, unanimous, lovely. Thank you very much, people. Okay, so date, time and venue of next meeting, Tuesday the 17th of November, beg your pardon, at 6:30 in the Town Hall if we are allowed out by November, or again 6 p.m. using Zoom software if we are still having virtual meetings. Thank you all very much for your time and extremely useful contributions to some very interesting discussions, which I suspect will be continuing through the autumn. And I look forward to chairing those discussions at the next meeting when we are discussing budget items. Thank you all very much for your attendance. I think that is it for this evening. So I wish you all a pleasant evening and hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Don't forget to turn the live stream off, Phil.
Turn the lights out these days.
I've got it if you